This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Yes, my brothers, my brodies, my woadies. I'm going to do another one of these little talk to cams. You might have noticed, through some of my videos, I officially joined the woke brigade. It's unfortunate, I didn't really want to, but I'm going to talk how we got here. My political arc has been pretty insane. At one point, I was in a Nico Malama video supporting Trump. That's me. I'll admit it. Blurry boy.
Trauma Reporters UK. I'm here. Look at my hat. I love Donald Trump.
So today we're going to talk about how I managed to escape the alt-right pipeline.
Up yours, woke moralists. How big is Luton?
It's 200,000 population.
And how many mosques?
45.
There will never be peace on this earth so long as we have this book. It's a violent and cursed book.
Attacks on mosques, other minority communities singled out, wanton violence alongside racist rhetoric.
When I was a young gangster, a YG, I was a little bruh, right? A little bruh. I'm about 13 years old. And we're invited into school. It was mandatory, we weren't invited. And we had to do a speech. So, my mate goes up and he does the history of Chelsea Football Club. A girl goes up and she does about horse riding. I go up with my little thumb drive, plug it in, 9/11. So I basically proceed to radicalise a classroom of young, impressionable 13-year-olds as to why the American government did 9/11.
Who do you believe was behind 9/11?
Criminal elements of the military-industrial complex, the same ones that staged Gulf of Tonkin, the same ones that staged the mass shootings of Operation Gladio.
Right.
Ooh.
I was in this kind of early conspiracy theory bubble. But what I want to say is it was interesting, right? Because at that time, being a conspiracy theorist wasn't left and right. It was just anti-establishment. And so whilst I was listening to Alex Jones, I'd also be listening to the Young Turks and listening about Occupy Wall Street. So when I was young, I was just a sort of contrarian hipster. I'm not like a communist, but I'm definitely not a capitalist, and I'm definitely left-wing, and I definitely voted to remain in the EU referendum. And so time goes by, I grow up, and I remember I got, I had a few jobs working like fucking Sainsbury's or B&Q, and that was further fueling my sort of anti-capitalist feelings. But I remember I got one job, and I met this geezer, and he was a proper right-winger.
Capitalism is good because capitalism is freedom. Socialism is bad because socialism is tyranny.
It was like a right-winger in the flesh. I'd never seen one before. I was like, what the fuck hell is this? Capitalism good? Welfare state bad? NHS bad? But you see, although I deeply disagreed with all of his views at the beginning, you gotta remember 13-year-old contrarian Jimmy. He's still in there somewhere. And what he's hearing is contrarian views, you say. Anti-establishment, non-mainstream. Little old hipster Jimmy lapped up this sort of right-wing rhetoric because I realised it was different to everyone else, and that would make me interesting if I believed all these things, right? And when I say right-wing, it's not, we don't like foreigners. It's stuff like this.
The people who get on welfare lose their human independence and feeling of dignity. They become subject to the dictates and whims of their welfare supervisor, who can tell them whether they can live here or there, whether they may put in a telephone, what they may do with their lives. They're treated like children.
So now I'm at the doors of the alt-right pipeline, right? I pick up my hat with the light, turn the torch on, grab my pickaxe, and I head in. And the first stop is Jordan Peterson.
And then if I'd said to you, please, I'd rather go by she, how would you respond to that on a personal level? How would...
The way I have responded to that, because I've had a number of conversations with transgendered individuals, is that I use whatever pronoun seems to go along with the persona that they're projecting publicly.
How can I describe the fact that someone who was once a woman, and really still is, had her breasts cut off because she, he, they, their, them had fallen prey to a viciously harmful fad?
So bear in mind, I didn't go to university. I went and just tried to make little businesses. I did a parkour brand, I ran a vegan food store, I did lots of little things. And very importantly, I was not academic. Jordan Peterson, to young Jimmy, sounded like how I imagine smart people sound.
So even if you do happen to be that avatar of moral purity that you claim implicitly, the probability that you'd get to act out your goodness in relationship to those possessed by your ideology is zero.
He would use big words, he would do this with his hands, he would think and contemplate. Like, he was the sort of caricature of a smart person. And it was very interesting because all of his views tended to be quite contrarian to sort of mainstream views. And he would, again, like my friend, he would talk about the benefits of capitalism. He would talk about natural hierarchies and that it wasn't capitalism's fault for hierarchies, but hierarchies are natural. And so it's very interesting because if you think about what Jordan Peterson is and what he thinks and his words now, back in 2016, it was very different, right?
As a matter of respect, in fact, would you refer to a trans person who asked you to use they, them pronouns, a pronoun which has a several hundred-year historical...
But that's not what we're talking about.
He rises to fame on what he is portraying as a free speech battle. The Canadian government are trying to make it so that if you say the wrong pronouns to a transgender person, you will go to jail. And Jordan Peterson never says something like, I don't believe in trans people, and so I don't believe I should say their pronouns. He's not saying that people who do transgender surgeries are butchers. He is saying that by law, I shouldn't be forced to say anything.
Difference between saying that there's something you can't say and saying that there are things that you have to say. And I regard these made-up pronouns, all of them, as the neologisms of radical PC authoritarians.
As I grew up, I kind of realized he misrepresented this bill and he was blowing things out of proportion. But if we just take it on face value and believe what he was saying, then yeah, it seemed illogical to oppose what he was saying. And so whilst I'm going through Jordan Peterson's books, his podcasts, his speeches, etc., I'm getting this feeling that there's this sort of crazy, indoctrinated Marxist left who are trying to suppress your freedom and usher in communism. And so all this is happening all the way in Canada where no one gives a fuck about. But what about here in Britain, right? In Britain, we have a sort of similar scenario. And it involves a man, a very controversial man by the name of Tommy Robinson. Before we go any further, I want to give a massive shout out to today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is undoubtedly the best, I'm not kidding, the best platform when it comes to making websites. Beautiful websites, ones that are perfectly tailored to you. With their new design intelligence, which combines the newest AI technology, plus their years of understanding and crafting beautiful website templates, you can now literally type in prompts to the AI and it will create a bespoke website to you and your brand. As well as that, their payment system. So if you're selling goods online and maybe you have customers all around the world, Squarespace takes so many different types of payments, it's now easier than ever. From Klarna to ACH Direct Debit, Apple Pay, and you can even do buy now, pay later with Afterpay and ClearPay. And also, the laborious job of writing product descriptions has got a whole world easier with Squarespace's Blueprint AI. You can just bang in a prompt, it will shoot out some text, you can tweak it and change it, and it will save you time and it's very good quality. So be sure to head over to squarespace.com/Jimmy the Giant, and to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain, use the code Jimmy the Giant. Anyway, back to the video.
This the Quran around in your hand
book is
in
the
that
reason,
disgraceful manner.
This book is
outrageous.
This book is the reason we're in such a mess.
Boys, I'm not proud of this, but I'm just being an honest person. I'm trying to explain where I was at, how I got to where I was, and how I am where I am now. And so I come across Tommy Robinson in this period of time where he goes to jail for, as he's presenting it to the audience online, trying to report on Muslim grooming gangs. He goes to jail. And I see this as a suppression of journalism, a suppression of free speech by a tyrannical government. You know, and I ignored the fact that it was contempt of court and he knew exactly it was contempt of court and he did it deliberately to provoke this reaction. But the way it was being presented was very clever. Again, it was all about free speech. It wasn't about the underlying issue of Islam, etc., but it was just about free speech. And so when you're already primed to be sort of libertarian, pro-free speech, and you're perceiving these attacks on free speech, you start to wonder, why are they attacking these people for their speech? And it unfortunately has this effect of making you think that the person is a truth teller and the government are trying to suppress them. And it reinforces your belief in what they're saying must have some truth to it if they want to hide it so bad. And these people, what I would now consider grifters, they know that. They know that that's the response and the feeling it's going to create in people. They want to be martyrs because then people will follow them even more ardently.
It's so important for the establishment because they know it brings the people. They know
Free Tommy Robinson and free him now.
And And so, yeah, I go to like a rally, like a free speech rally when Tommy Robinson's about to go to jail, and I come across Nico, and I see Nico, and I've seen him online, and I saw how he was trying to present everyone that went to a Tommy Robinson rally as a racist. And I knew from my perspective and knowing who I was, I knew I wasn't a racist. And so I go up to Nico and I tell the people around him that he's trolling you and he's trying to like make you look stupid online. And then Nico does misrepresent me in the video, and he says that I went up to the police and told them to get rid of Nico.
The police then came over and surprise, he started crying to them as well.
When in reality, I was actually saying to the police that Nico has his free speech. Because, you know, I'm fucking obsessed with free speech in this period of time. I don't know why. I think it's the single most important thing on earth. But either way, like, as much as I disagree with myself for being at that rally and supporting Tommy Robinson in that time, I still stand by the fact that I don't think these people understood why people were presenting them as racist, right? And I just want to touch on that.
Tell me a Trump policy right now.
I support...
Fake. Waffle. You're waffling, man. Yeah, answer the question.
I support his trade policy.
How dare you fake this? How dare you?
You know, now, from, you know, the view I have now, I understand there are sort of two types of racism. There's like overt racism, which is like, you know, I fucking hate migrants when you send them back, they're the worst. And then you have this kind of more like subconscious racism, or like in effect racism. And what I mean by that is, like, I knew I wasn't racist because I grew up very multiculturally and I liked people of different races. I had lots of friendships with them and I got along with them very well. So I never in my heart felt anything bad towards people of different races. But what can happen from there is when you think you're like immune to racism, you sometimes are more susceptible to it in a way, but just a different type of racism. These grifters know they can't just say that, I don't know, black people are inferior genetically, although some of them have started doing that again. They've found sneakier ways of wrapping it, often by hiding behind culture. These pundits will lie and say stuff like 84% of grooming gangs are Asian Pakistani, which has been endlessly disproven. It is white people who make up the majority of grooming gangs. But all this misinformation can lead you to believe that their culture is inferior to ours, and therefore we can't mix. And with the Tommy Robinson thing, it's kind of the same when it comes to Islam, right? You didn't hate people for being like having brown skin. You were simply critiquing their ideology, their beliefs.
You wouldn't do that with
Sir William
Would you do that with the Bible? Show some respect.
Show some respect.
Show some respect.
Have you read this book?
For people.
Have you read this book?
There are over
There's
a billion people.
So, you know, I'm listening to the greatest hits, right? I'm listening to Ben Shapiro debate some 12-year-old feminist. I'm listening to Jordan Peterson, Matt Walsh, I'm Joe Rogan till I fucking die. And I find myself accepting that I must be right-wing now. And, you know, little hipster Jimmy, that's cool because now I'm different to everyone. I'm the contrarian, right? I have all the different opinions. Oh no, the sky isn't blue. Actually, no, it's a shade of maroon. And like when you're listening to all this stuff, you get this sort of impression of the left, like what you're perceiving the left to be like, basically the worst of the left.
You know you're a millennial when you question whether or not it's ethical to bring children into this world. Because of climate change, we don't really know whether or not the world's going to be habitable in 30 years.
And so you just get pushed further and further right from more of a reactionary position rather than some actual ideological and maybe academic understanding of economies and politics. It just sort of is a feeling. And it's so funny, like when Ben Shapiro and these sort of people get famous off of facts don't care about your feelings. But to be honest, like conservatives these days, it just seems to be mainly emotion. It's how they feel about topics. They hate when you bring up academic papers and actual facts, and they don't trust any of that.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
And ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Either way, I find myself as a right-winger. I have not descended into overtly racist beliefs or overtly transphobic beliefs, misogynistic beliefs. I haven't gone that far, but I probably do house some sort of unconscious discriminatory beliefs in maybe trans people, perhaps even women to a degree. Again, often wrapping their push for equality and better rights as some kind of Marxist revolution. But I believe in the typical sort of right-wing viewpoint that the state should be smaller, that people are responsible for themselves, and probably that like poor people are just lazy and they need to fix their own shit, and that billionaires and corporations are really good and like, you know, sort of, unless they're the ones that, I don't know, Russell Brand says is bad, and then all of a sudden they're bad because they're tied to, I don't know, George Soros. George Soros business, bad. Bill Gates business, bad. But Elon Musk buying Twitter, good. Very good. Anyway, I'm deep in the pipeline, right? I'm deep. COVID happens. Obviously, I don't get vaxxed. I don't wear the mask. I'm sorry if I killed anyone. And, you know, again, I regret that position now. I literally didn't want to get vaxxed, not because I thought it had 5G in it or something, but just because I was so sort of libertarian right-wing that I didn't like the fact the government were telling me to do it. And like, I don't know, I'm here today, I'm vaccinated, and the woke police haven't come to my door yet, so probably I was overreacting.
Vaccine passports. While we've been looking in other directions, they are being slowly yet deliberately introduced. Are they the linchpin in a global surveillance network?
So you might be wondering, like, what was the moment? Like, when did it all change? When did the dam break? And there was a moment, right? And I can kind of point to it specifically. And it was through making my videos. Now, as you know, you guys watching, you're probably really into all the social political stuff I do. But originally, I was a parkour YouTuber. And then I become like an extreme sports YouTuber. And when I got to the end of this period in 2022, I wanted to diversify my content, right? And I remember genuinely, I thought I was probably even going to make like those sort of right-wing documentary series, like things like Jen or like some of Moon's stuff, you know, that kind of thing. I thought I'd end up in that ilk. But you see, because I was a smart bruh and I could read the room, I knew that I couldn't make a video why Jordan Peterson's the best man alive. I knew I had to take my time to kind of meander. So I made a video on a very specific topic about chavs.
Clothing brands that you didn't like were called chavvy. Rough neighborhoods were considered chav infested. But what exactly is a chav? And most importantly, where did they all go?
And so I made this video. It's really interesting if you rewatch it, because my biases and all of my thinking going into this video is that chavs are bad because they were dickheads and they chose to be bad. But whilst making the video and wanting to address the question, like, where did chavs go? Why did they disappear? I stumbled across a geezer called Owen Jones. I see Owen Jones and all of but you see it in the video. I'm like, look guys, I'm about to quote Owen Jones. I don't agree with him, but what he says about chavs is really interesting. You should probably listen to it.
Truly a war in the public sphere. The author and journalist Owen Jones, who I have to admit, I don't really agree with him on a lot. He wrote an entire book called Chavs.
So I read it and I'm like, fuck, maybe chavs were like a product of their environment and their economic status. Bear in mind, this is the opposite. This is the antithesis of my view, is that I would have believed as a right-winger that cultures are just like people who make decisions to behave in the way they want to. So these are bad people who are choosing to be bad. So after this video, I go down different rabbit holes. I'm making different subcultures. I do skinheads and I do football hooligans, which are both in a very interesting period of time, which is the Thatcher era. And the more I research into Thatcher and see how she completely flipped this country on its head, she completely radicalized Britain into being extreme neoliberal capitalists. And it's kind of become just assumed that that's how the world has always worked, that's how we are. But then I discovered that at some point in society, we weren't fucking insane capitalists that we are right now. I've discovered this because there was a period of time called the post-war consensus, which I talk about fucking endlessly on this channel. But in that period of time, we followed a style of economics that was called Keynesianism, which meant that the government's job was to make sure everyone was employed and to tax the wealthy at higher rates, use that money to build infrastructure that benefited the people. And then bear in mind, you know, I'm listening to Donald Trump saying, make America great again, and everyone's harping on about how the world was better back in like the 60s and 50s. And then I find out the reason why it was better was because we had mass public investment. This investment led to the greatest economic boom in history, raised many of the working class into the middle class, which created a whole host of new industries, new products, basically, it was good shit. What we did then was good. And you know, you got to bear in mind that I am being told the only answer to life's problems is dog eat dog, free market capitalism. Get the government out of everything. The government can do nothing right. Only the geniuses of commerce can do anything, like our water supply that has no piss and poo in it, or like our really quick and definitely on time and affordable train system, or like our really affordable housing that people definitely aren't speculating on and shrinking the middle class.
Private water companies are dumping huge amounts of raw sewage in Britain's rivers and off its coastlines. They're doing so to save money, to ensure returns for shareholders and by extension to guarantee massive salaries for bosses at the top.
And so yeah, time's going past, man, and I'm learning this shit, and I'm like, fuck, and I'm starting to realize, like, I don't know if I believe all the things that I believe about right-wing politics, but I hadn't accepted it, right? I was becoming more and more distrustful. Things like this, right? 1 month I went on holiday to Thailand. I walk in a coffee shop and I see the most beautiful woman on earth, who is now my wife, and she is Ukrainian. I go to Ukraine. Literally, during the war, I've been to Ukraine many times, and I've experienced air raids. I've heard bombs go off.
There again, more attacks. Putin must be having a slow day.
All the while, I look on my phone at all the right-wingers talking about Ukraine, and they believe that Zelensky is like, I don't know, a blue-haired feminist or something.
I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine.
And they're trying to say that it's actually NATO, and NATO are the bad guys, and America's bad, even though we're pro-America, America is bad. And, you know, I'm learning more about the Ukrainian conflict and all the history of how it came to be and why we defend them and why we can't allow Russia to just go and take over sovereign nations. And so you learn more and more about this. But then there was two people I come across that really like cemented the change, right? So I'm becoming distrustful of the right. I'm starting to see, like, you know, their takes on Ukraine as being ridiculous. And then I come across a streamer. So right now we're deep in the sort of Andrew Tate era. Andrew Tate has blown up, and at first it was kind of, you know, it was kind of fun. It was like, especially if you're sort of a young right-wing libertarian type, you need to get strong to look after yourself, look after women, looking after the people you love. Like, that sort of stuff was kind of nice. I started going to the gym, I started doing all that stuff. I was always sort of into the self-help stuff, so all that shit sounded good. And then he started to talk about women.
To some degree, as a man, you have to instill drama in the relationship, because if you don't, she's going to get bored.
No, that's very true, man.
And she's either going to leave or she will instill the drama, which gives her control.
Then you're seeing all these Fresh and Fit podcasts and Sneeko and all this crazy shit. And you're seeing like people making their entire livings complaining about women. And you're like, what the fuck is this? And there was one bruh who would go on these shows, and his name was Destiny.
Women fare a lot better post-divorce than men do, bro. And the reason why is because they get the resource, they get the money, they get the children, they get put in a better situation financially.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
Dude, they get the house. Moms don't live good on child support. That's not true. What? Have you ever seen a bitch on child support? She's not living the greatest fucking life.
Women fare worse than men in almost every degree after divorces. So the idea of pretending...
What are you talking about?
They make more money. They have better dating strategies afterwards. Men just do better than women in almost every single metric post-divorce.
What? Bro?
Destiny was really interesting because he was a lefty and he was proud to be a lefty. He didn't try and hide. He didn't say he was like a centrist. He was like, no, I'm on the left. But he didn't play into like the left-wing woke crazy stereotype. He was just a normal dude who presented left-wing ideas but was really good at debating. Now remember, debating the left up until this point was Ben Shapiro debating a 4-year-old. But now you're seeing someone who's actually quite well versed in the beliefs of the right wing, debating them and winning a lot. So I get into Destiny, right? And I even was going to make a video on Destiny. I might do it again one day. And I had a conversation with him on a stream, but I was so right-wing at the time, I didn't know how to make the video because I kind of had this mental block between really asking him sort of questions. But then the final nail in the coffin for me, at the point where I realized I was no longer right-wing, was when I came across Gary's economics.
You need to have structures in place in your economy that prevent the rich from taking all of the wealth. If you don't have that, history teaches us the rich get all of the wealth. And once the rich have all of the wealth, ordinary people end up with very poor living conditions. If you go to countries that are very unequal, India, South Africa, almost anywhere in Latin America, very unequal societies lead to very poor living standards.
Gary is like a working class geezer and he became super wealthy as a trader. And his whole thesis was that income inequality is going to get worse. And he betted on that. He made money predicting that, and it came to fruition. Income inequality has got much worse. And what's interesting, right, is he talks about income inequality and why it was bad and why it's bad for house prices and cost of living, etc. But the thing is, and I don't know if he doesn't really talk about this too much, but it clicked, it unlocked this vault in the back of my brain. It was this old memory of a clip that Jordan Peterson had put out. And it was him talking about the correlation between income inequality and crime.
You always hear this idea that poverty causes crime. That's a classic left-wing idea, but it's wrong.
What causes crime, especially aggressive crime, is relative poverty. Poverty is when you don't have enough to eat. Relative poverty is when the guy next door has a much better car than you.
The right wing really love to argue about culture. They always say that like it's people's, the problems in society comes from people's ideas and beliefs and their values, which is super convenient, right? Because when anything goes bad, you can just say that, oh, well, it's because people are lazy or they're radical Marxist or this. All the while, there's no solution to that, right? What can you do? You can't change people's minds. So it's just like, oh, well, I guess we just have to accept the status quo. But when you fundamentally challenge that view, the sort of outcomes come from culture and people's individual decisions, and you start to realize that outcomes, you know, like negative outcomes, crime, poverty, people having less families, having less kids, that maybe doesn't come from culture. Maybe the reason that men and women aren't having kids and getting married isn't because they're no longer Christian and they don't believe in families and the nuclear family. Maybe it's because no one can fucking afford to have families. Maybe it's because most people in their 20s still haven't moved out of their parents' house. Maybe it's because they don't make enough money between two people to afford to have a child. There's all these things that are happening, and you realize that probably the economic system is causing this. And it isn't just that the testosterone levels in men have dropped because, I don't know, they've fucking touched receipts or something. And so yeah, the sort of like the needle drop, is that the expression? The pin drop, it all sort of made sense. I realized that I actually don't think everything is culture, and I think mainly things come from economics. I think most culture comes from economics. And like, yeah, of course, attitudes, values, beliefs, they also have an impact, but I think you cannot understate economics. And so from there, as I've had my fucking left-wing epiphany, my left-wiffany, I start to really realize, like, kind of the woke stuff, yeah, it's annoying. Do we need to argue about if there's an egg in a salad emoji? Is that really that important? And you start seeing, like, I don't know, Matt Walsh, where he's done this whole documentary, What is a Woman? And he's the expert in this, going on Joe Rogan, being asked how many kids are on puberty blockers because this is real fucking moral panic.
How many people have had this done?
Depends on what. I don't think we have exact numbers, but if we're talking about the drugs, millions.
It's a very small number, if that's right.
It says over the last 5 years, there were at least 4,780 adolescents who started puberty blockers and had a prior gender dysphoria diagnosis.
If your politics spends more time talking about, I don't know, what toilet a transgendered person is going to piss in, or the woke brigade, if it spends more time on that than the cost of living, the housing crisis, rising inequality, things that, you know, are actually important and actually affect your lives, if you're more focused on the former, then I hate to say it, but you've been bamboozled.
Google react to radical vegans screaming away by removing the egg from their salad emoji.
So what?
What about my rights as somebody who loves eggs to have the egg in the emoji?
It's an endless trope. These sort of moral panics, these clutching of pearls over social issues tend to seemingly always happen when there's economic problems. Like, I think it was in the 70s where they tried to ban Dungeons and Dragons, the board game, because it was satanic and demonic. It just so happened that the 70s was like a massive economic crisis. And so yeah, the more I made these videos, the more I started to see these patterns, right? These patterns between the 20s and the 30s, the rise of fascism in the West, and how that seemed to tie in with the Great Depression. And then you notice that in the 70s and the 80s, you see the rise of the National Front, the racists and all this sort of stuff. That just happened to be the same time as stagflation and the oil crisis. And then now, lo and behold, 2024, we're in big economic problems, and it just so happens that the far right is on the rise, and the Tommy Robinson Farage followers are now throwing bricks at mosques. It's a repeatable story, and like when I've made these videos, you start seeing these patterns, and you start seeing how it plays out, and it always comes back to economics. And like, look, I have no hatred towards people who are on the right. I actually feel a lot of sympathy to most right-wingers, because being where they were, I understand that they've kind of just been manipulated, typically. They've trusted people who present information that try and rile them up, that make a lot of money from doing so, and they distract them from real issues. And the thing is, they're feeling the real issues. The real issues are affecting them, and they're trying to work out why. What is it? And the right will always try and find scapegoats to point at. It always does it. And like, as I've learned more, as I've read the book from George Monbiot, The Hidden Ideology of Neoliberalism, Yanis, I can never say his name, Vokoris or whatever, his book, Techno-Feudalism, I kind of realized like the argument should be about economics. The more I learn about the left and right economic theories, the more evidence that I can see that left-wing economics tends to result in better growth and prosperity for all people. Our system currently is great for the 1%. It's great for the ultra-wealthy because it monopolizes money into few hands. When you don't have rules to regulate certain businesses, when you tax people less and less, it becomes this like race to the bottom. And there's a funny reason as to why I believe in these kind of left-wing values, and it ties back to my original right-wing ideology, is because of meritocracy. The right always claim to believe in meritocracy, that we should, as a society, reward people who are good at things, right? And I genuinely believe that. However, I don't believe meritocracy exists when some people can inherit the best education, eat the best foods, have time to do sports, be healthy, have time to learn the oboe and the trombone whilst doing the Free Peaks challenge. That person has such an incredible advantage over the person at the bottom of the hierarchy. The person who grew up in poverty, whose dad's in jail, whose mum has to work 3 jobs. That person who then has to leave home at 16 to pay rent and they can't afford to save a single penny. And the fact that this group of people that are living like this is growing, child poverty is growing, I think it's utterly insane to pretend that there is a meritocracy. But the right wing, through a very concerted effort, has brainwashed most of society to believe that this is inevitable. We can't fix this. There's nothing we can do about this. But we know we can. We have in the past. Countries do right now. And so that is where I land. If it means that I now have to wear a badge to show I'm part of the woke brigade, so be it. I've accepted that through actually delving into this stuff, looking into social economic problems, reading papers from academics, not listening to Jordan Peterson tell me that the academia world is overrun by Marxists. I've learned some stuff and I've challenged my way of viewing the world and had to challenge my ego at the same time. So I want to know you guys' evolution. Like, have you always believed in what you believe? Has it ever changed? What changed it? So drop that in the comments below. Join the Discord. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.